Jake Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he guided his small ship through the asteroid field. The Lucky Strike wasn't much to look at, but she had gotten him out of more tight spots than he could count. Today felt like it might be one of those days. "Come on, baby," Jake muttered to his ship as he spotted the derelict vessel floating between two large rocks. "That's got to be worth at least 50,000 credits. The abandoned ship looked expensive. Its hull gleamed even in the dim starlight, and Jake could see strange symbols carved along its sides. He had never seen anything like it before, but that didn't matter. Salvage was salvage, and Jake needed the money. He pushed the Lucky Strike's engines harder, weaving between the floating rocks with practiced ease. Jake had been doing this job for 8 years, ever since he left the military. He knew these asteroid fields better than anyone, and he wasn't about to let some other salvage crew beat him to this prize. As he got closer to the derelict ship, Jake frowned. Something was wrong. The vessel didn't look damaged at all. In fact, it looked like it was just sitting there waiting. But his sensors showed no life signs, no power readings. Maybe the crew had abandoned it after engine failure. Jake was so focused on the mysterious ship that he almost missed the warning beep from his collision sensors. Almost. What the hell? Jake yanked the controls hard to the right, but it was too late. The Lucky Strike slammed into something that hadn't been there a second ago. Alarm screamed throughout his small cockpit as Jake fought to regain control. Whatever he had hit was big, and it was moving. Through his cracked view screen, Jake saw another ship materialize out of nowhere. It was sleek and beautiful, with flowing curves that made it look more like art than machinery. But right now it was spinning out of control, sparks flying from its damaged hull. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," Jake said as he managed to stabilize his own ship. The Lucky Strike's engines were making horrible grinding noises, and half his instruments were dead. But the other ship looked worse. Much worse. Jake tried his radio. "Unknown vessel, this is salvage ship Lucky Strike. Are you okay over there? I'm sorry I didn't see you until it was too late." Static filled the channel for a moment, then a voice came through. It was clearly female, but speaking in a language Jake had never heard before. The tone sounded angry, which Jake figured was probably fair. "I don't understand you," Jake said into his radio. "Do you speak standard?" "English? Anything?" More angry-sounding words in that strange language. Then, to Jake's surprise, a hesitant voice said, "You speak standard?" "Yes." "Yes, I speak standard. Are you hurt? Your ship looks pretty banged up." There was a long pause. Then the voice said, "My ship is damaged. Your ship hit my ship." "I know, and I'm really sorry about that. My name is Jake. Can you tell me your name?" Another pause. "I am Zara." Jake looked at his damage reports and winced. Both ships were in bad shape, but they might be able to fix them if they worked together. "Listen, Zara, I think we're both stuck here for a while. Neither of our ships can make it out of this asteroid field right now, but maybe we can help each other." "You wish to help? You damaged my vessel." "Yeah, I did, and I feel terrible about it. But sitting here arguing won't fix either of our ships. I've got some repair supplies, and I'm pretty good with a wrench. What do you say?" The radio was quiet for so long that Jake started to wonder if Zara was still there. Finally, her voice came back, sounding uncertain. "You would help repair my ship? Even though we are strangers?" "Of course. It's the right thing to do. Besides, if I help fix your ship, maybe you can help me fix mine." Jake suited up and made his way over to Zara's ship using his emergency thruster pack. When he reached the airlock, he was amazed by how advanced everything looked. The metal seemed to glow with its own light, and the control panels were covered in those same strange symbols he had seen on the derelict ship. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and Jake got his first look at Zara. She was tall and graceful, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Her hair was long and silver, and she wore clothes that looked like they were made of liquid metal. Jake had seen pictures of aliens before, but never met one in person. "You are human," Zara said, studying Jake with obvious curiosity. "Guilty as charged," Jake said with a smile. "And you're Kalarian, right?" "I've heard about your people, but I've never actually met one before." Zara's eyes widened slightly. "You know of the Kalarian Empire?" "A little. I know your people are supposed to be really advanced and that you don't usually talk to humans much." Jake looked around the ship's interior, impressed despite himself. "This is incredible. I've never seen technology like this." For the next 3 days, Jake and Zara worked together to repair both ships. Jake was amazed by how quickly Zara learned to use human tools, and she seemed fascinated by his approach to problem solving. Why do you do it that way? She asked as Jake jury-rigged a power coupling using spare parts from his ship. Because it works, Jake said with a shrug. It might not be pretty, but it gets the job done. Sometimes the simple solution is the best solution. Zara watched as Jake's makeshift repair brought power back to her navigation systems. Your people think differently than mine. How so? Kalarians would design a perfect solution. We would plan for many days, consider every possibility, but you... She gestured at Jake's repair work. You just do what needs to be done. Yeah, well, sometimes you don't have time to make it perfect. Sometimes you just need to make it work. As they worked, Jake found himself enjoying Zara's company more than he had expected. She was curious about everything, asking him questions about human culture, technology, and philosophy. In return, she told him about her homeworld and her people's way of life. On the third night, as they shared a meal from Jake's emergency rations, Zara asked, "Why did you help me? Your people and mine are not friends." Jake thought about it for a moment. Because you needed help and I could provide it. It doesn't matter where you're from or what species you are. We're all just trying to get by in this big, crazy universe. Zara stared at him for a long time, something unreadable in her dark eyes. You are not what I expected from a human. What did you expect? Someone less honorable. The next morning, rescue ships arrived for both of them. Jake watched as a massive Kalarian vessel approached, its hull shimmering like a jewel against the stars. His own rescue ship looked tiny and crude by comparison. As they prepared to part ways, Zara turned to Jake. Thank you, Jake Martinez. I will not forget your kindness. Take care of yourself. Zara, maybe we'll meet again sometime. As Jake watched her ship disappear into hyperspace, he had no idea that their accidental meeting would change both of their lives forever. He certainly never imagined that in a few weeks, he would be summoned to meet the most powerful ruler in the galaxy. But fate, as Jake would soon learn, had very different plans for a simple salvage pilot from Earth. 3 weeks after his encounter with Zara, Jake was fixing a broken fuel pump on the Lucky Strike when his communication system started beeping. He ignored it at first, assuming it was another salvage company trying to hire him for a dangerous job, but the beeping continued, growing more insistent. All right, Jake muttered, wiping his greasy hands on a rag before answering the call. The face that appeared on his screen made Jake's heart skip a beat. It was Admiral Lisa Parker, one of the highest-ranking officers in the Earth Space Command. Jake had served under her during his military days, and she wasn't the type to make social calls. Jake Martinez, Admiral Parker said, her expression serious. You need to report to Haven 7 immediately. Admiral, with all due respect, I'm not in the military anymore. I'm just a salvage pilot trying to make a living. This isn't a request, Martinez. It's an order. You have 12 hours to reach Haven 7 or we'll come get you ourselves. The screen went black, leaving Jake staring at his own reflection. Haven 7 was a neutral space station that served as a meeting point for diplomatic talks between different species. Whatever was happening there, it had to be big if they were calling in a washed-up salvage pilot. Jake arrived at Haven 7 with an hour to spare. The massive space station was bustling with activity, and he could see ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its ports. But what caught his attention were the two largest vessels he had ever seen in his life. One was clearly human, bristling with weapons and armor plating. The other was Kalarian, and it took Jake's breath away. The ship looked like it had been carved from a single enormous crystal, its surface reflecting the light of nearby stars in patterns that hurt to look at directly. A human security officer met Jake at the docking bay and escorted him through corridors filled with diplomats, translators, and officials from both species. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. What's this all about? Jake asked his escort. Peace talks, the officer replied curtly. First formal negotiations between humans and Kalarians in over 50 years. And somehow you're part of it. They arrived at a conference room where Admiral Parker was waiting with several other high-ranking officials. She looked up as Jake entered, her expression unreadable. Jake, thank you for coming. We need to talk. Admiral, I have no idea why I'm here. I'm not a diplomat, and I sure as hell don't know anything about interstellar politics. No, but you know Princess Zara Velthari. And apparently she knows you. Jake's mouth went dry. Princess? Zara is a princess? Not just any princess, Admiral Parker said grimly. She's the heir to the Kalarian Empire, and she specifically requested your presence at these negotiations. The question is why? Before Jake could answer, the doors to the conference room opened and the Kaelarian delegation entered. Jake had thought Zara was impressive, but the woman who led the group made his knees weak. Queen Zithara Velthari was tall and regal, with the same pale blue skin as her daughter, but an aura of power that filled the room. Her silver hair was woven with what looked like actual stars, and her dark eyes seemed to see everything at once. She wore robes that shifted color as she moved, and every step she took commanded absolute attention. Behind her walked Zara, looking more beautiful than Jake remembered. She wore formal court dress now, but when their eyes met across the room, she gave him the same warm smile he remembered from their time together in the asteroids. "Your Majesty," Admiral Parker said with a respectful bow, "welcome to Haven 7. Queen Zithara's gaze swept the room until it landed on Jake. "Admiral Parker, I trust this is the human my daughter spoke of?" "Yes, Your Majesty. Jake Martinez, salvage pilot and former military officer." The Queen studied Jake for a long moment, her expression giving nothing away. Then, to everyone's surprise, she smiled. "So you are the one who helped my daughter. Zara has told me much about you, Jake Martinez." Jake felt like he was drowning. "Your Majesty, I had no idea who Zara was when we met. I was just trying to help someone in trouble." "Yes," the Queen said, her smile growing wider. "That is exactly what she told me." The formal negotiations began an hour later in the station's main conference hall. Jake found himself seated at the human delegation's table, still not sure why he was there. The talks covered everything from trade agreements to territorial boundaries, and Jake understood maybe half of what was being discussed. But he noticed that Queen Zithara kept looking at him throughout the proceedings. Whenever a human delegate made a point about human culture or values, her dark eyes would flick to Jake, as if she was measuring his reaction. During a break in the negotiations, Zara approached Jake. "I am glad you came," she said quietly. "Zara, why didn't you tell me you were a princess? Would it have changed how you treated me?" Jake thought about it. "No, probably not. Then why does it matter now?" Before Jake could answer, Queen Zithara appeared beside them. Up close she was even more intimidating, but there was something warm in her eyes when she looked at Jake. "Walk with me, Jake Martinez," she said. It wasn't a request. They strolled through one of the station's observation decks, looking out at the stars. The Queen was quiet for a long time before she spoke. "Tell me about humans," she said finally. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Your customs, your beliefs, your way of thinking. My daughter says you approach problems differently than we do." Jake shrugged. "I guess we're more direct. We see a problem, we try to fix it. We don't always wait for the perfect solution. And this works for your people?" "Most of the time. We've made it this far anyway." Queen Zithara nodded thoughtfully. "In Kaelarian society, everything has its place. Every person knows their role from birth to death. The nobles rule, the workers work, and the soldiers fight. It has been this way for thousands of years." "That sounds stable," Jake said carefully. "Stable, yes, but perhaps not dynamic. Your people, they can rise above their birth circumstances, yes? Sure. I grew up poor, but I made it into the military, then started my own business. In human society, you can become whatever you're willing to work for." The Queen was quiet again, her eyes fixed on the stars. Fascinating. When they returned to the conference room, the negotiations had stalled. The Kaelarian and human delegates were arguing about mining rights in disputed territory, and neither side was willing to compromise. Queen Zithara listened to the arguments for a few minutes, then raised her hand for silence. "I have a proposal," she said. "A cultural exchange program. We will send some of our people to live among humans, and humans will come to live among us. We will learn from each other." Admiral Parker leaned forward. "That's an interesting idea, Your Majesty. But who would participate in such a program?" Queen Zithara's eyes found Jake across the room. "I believe we already have our first volunteer." Jake felt every eye in the room turn to him. "Your Majesty, I'm just a salvage pilot." "Exactly," the Queen said with that mysterious smile. "You are exactly what we need." As the implications of the Queen's words sank in, Jake realized that his simple life was about to become very complicated. But looking at Zara's hopeful face and thinking about the possibility of bridging the gap between their two species, he found himself nodding. "All right," Jake said. "I'm in." Admiral Parker looked like she wanted to object, but Queen Zithara was already standing. Excellent. We will begin immediately. Jake Martinez, you will accompany us to the Kailarian homeworld. As the delegates began discussing the details of this unexpected turn of events, Jake caught Zara's eye. She was smiling, but there was something in her expression that made him wonder what he was really getting himself into. The Queen, meanwhile, was already making plans. Plans that would change not just Jake's life, but the entire balance of power between two civilizations. Jake just didn't know it yet. Jake had seen pictures of the Kailarian homeworld, but nothing had prepared him for the real thing. As their ship descended through the atmosphere, he pressed his face against the viewport and stared in amazement. The capital city stretched as far as he could see, its spires reaching up toward the sky like frozen waterfalls. Every building seemed to be made of the same crystal-like material as the Queen's ship, and they all glowed with soft, shifting colors that changed as Jake watched. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Zara said, moving to stand beside him at the viewport. "It's incredible," Jake said honestly. "How do you build something like this?" "Very carefully and very slowly. This city has been growing for over 10,000 years. The royal palace was even more impressive than the city around it. It rose from the center of the capital like a mountain made of light, its countless levels and terraces creating a maze of gardens, halls, and chambers that seemed to go on forever. Jake was given quarters in what Zara told him was the guest wing, though his rooms were larger and more luxurious than any place he had ever lived. The walls were transparent in places, offering views of the city below, and furniture that seemed to reshape itself based on Jake's needs. "This is too much," Jake said as a servant showed him around the rooms. "I'm just a salvage pilot." The servant, a young Kailarian male with the same blue skin and silver hair as the royal family, looked confused. "The Queen has ordered that you be treated with the highest honor, Jake Martinez. We do not question the Queen's orders." That evening, Jake was summoned to dine with the royal family. He had expected a formal meal with dozens of nobles, but instead found himself in a smaller, more intimate setting with just the Queen, Zara, and a few other family members. "I trust your quarters are satisfactory?" Queen Zithera asked as they began the meal. "More than satisfactory, Your Majesty. Thank you for your hospitality. You are our honored guest, Jake Martinez. And please call me Zithera. We are not so formal here as your people might believe." The meal was unlike anything Jake had ever tasted. Each dish seemed to change flavors as he ate it, and some of the foods actually glowed on his plate. But what struck him most was how normal the conversation felt. The royal family asked him about his life, his work, and his opinions on everything from music to philosophy. "Tell me," Zithera said as they finished the main course, "what do you think of our city?" "It's amazing," Jake said. "I've never seen anything like it. But it must have taken incredible organization to build something this complex." "Indeed. Every stone was placed according to careful plans. Every detail designed by our greatest architects. Nothing was left to chance." Jake nodded politely. But something in the Queen's tone made him think she was getting at something else. His suspicions were confirmed. The next morning when Zara came to his quarters with an unusual request. "My mother has a task for you," she said, though she looked somewhat uncomfortable about it. "What kind of task?" "There is a dispute between two of our noble houses over mining rights on one of our colony worlds. The matter has been debated for months with no resolution. Mother wants you to provide perspective." Jake stared at her. "I'm not qualified to settle disputes between alien nobles. I don't know anything about your laws or customs." "That may be exactly why she chose you." The meeting was held in a grand chamber filled with Kailarian nobles wearing elaborate robes and jewelry. Jake felt completely out of place in his simple human clothes as Zara introduced him to the feuding parties. Lord Vextar claimed that his family had traditional rights to mine the disputed territory, while Lady Melthara argued that her house had been granted those rights by royal decree 2 centuries earlier. Both sides presented complex legal arguments supported by ancient documents and precedents. Jake listened for an hour as the nobles debated back and forth, getting nowhere. Finally, he raised his hand. "Can I ask a question?" He said. The room fell silent. Lord Vextar looked annoyed at the interruption, but nodded. "Why don't you just split the territory in half? That way both houses get to mine and everyone wins." The nobles stared at him in shock. Lady Melthara was the first to speak, but the precedents. The traditional boundaries Look, Jake said, I don't know anything about your traditions, but I know that two groups fighting over one resource while neither of them benefits doesn't make sense. You could spend the next 2 centuries arguing about who has the right to mine there, or you could spend that time actually mining. Lord Vextar frowned. The humans suggest we ignore thousands of years of legal tradition. I'm suggesting you focus on what actually matters, Jake replied. Do you want to be right or do you want to be profitable? After another hour of discussion, the nobles agreed to Jake's solution. As they left the chamber, Zara shook her head in amazement. I cannot believe that worked. Sometimes an outside perspective helps, Jake said. When you're too close to a problem, you can't see the simple solutions. Word of Jake's success spread quickly through the palace, and soon Queen Zithara was sending him to resolve other disputes. A trade disagreement between merchants, a boundary dispute between provinces, a conflict over military promotions. Each time, Jake approached the problem the same way he approached everything else, by focusing on practical solutions rather than complex theories. And each time he managed to find a resolution that satisfied everyone involved, but it was his conversation with Captain Ryan Cole that made Jake realize what was really happening. Ryan had arrived on the homeworld as part of the human liaison team, and Jake was relieved to see a familiar face. They met in Jake's quarters away from Kalarian ears. Jake, you need to be careful, Ryan said without preamble. You're being manipulated. What do you mean? Think about it. You accidentally crash into a princess, get invited to peace talks, and now you're living in the royal palace solving problems for the queen. Does any of that strike you as coincidence? Jake frowned. You think this was planned? I think Queen Zithara has been watching humans for a long time, and when the opportunity presented itself, she grabbed you. But why me? I'm nobody special. Ryan shook his head. That's exactly why she chose you. You're not a politician or a diplomat. You're just a regular guy who does what needs to be done, and that makes you dangerous to their whole system. Dangerous how? Jake, their society is built on the idea that some people are born to rule and others are born to serve. But you're proving that good ideas can come from anyone, regardless of their birth or station. You're showing them that there's another way. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He walked through the palace gardens thinking about what Ryan had said. The more he thought about it, the more sense it made. Every problem the Queen had given him to solve had been designed to showcase human approaches to leadership and problem-solving. He was still walking when he encountered Queen Zithara in one of the garden pavilions. She was sitting alone looking up at the stars. Troubled thoughts, Jake Martinez? Jake decided to be direct. Your Majesty, why am I really here? Zithara smiled as if she had been expecting the question. You are here because my empire is dying. Dying? But you're the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. Powerful, yes, but static. Unchanging. For thousands of years we have done things the same way, thought the same thoughts, followed the same patterns. And now our young people look to the stars and see species like yours, growing and changing and adapting, and they wonder why they cannot do the same. Jake sat down beside her. So you want to change things? I want to save my people. But change cannot come from the top down, not in our society. It must come from example, from demonstration. It must come from someone who shows a better way. Someone like me. Someone exactly like you. Zithara turned to look at him. You have proven that wisdom does not require noble birth, that leadership can come from character rather than bloodline. You have shown my people possibilities they never dreamed of. And what happens when I leave? When I go back to my own life? Queen Zithara's smile became mysterious. Who says you are leaving, Jake Martinez? I have much grander plans for you than that. As she stood and walked away, leaving Jake alone in the garden, he realized that his simple life was never coming back. The Queen had plans for him, plans that would change everything he thought he knew about his future. And somewhere in the palace, Princess Zara was making plans of her own. Jake was in the middle of mediating another dispute when the first explosion shook the palace. The ornate windows rattled in their frames, and several of the Kalarian nobles grabbed onto furniture to keep their balance. What was that? Jake asked. But before anyone could answer, alarms began wailing throughout the complex. Zara burst into the chamber, her usual calm demeanor replaced by urgent concern. Jake, we need to go, now. What's happening? Duke Karath has begun his rebellion. The palace is under attack. As they ran through the corridors, Zara explained what Jake had already suspected. The traditional noble houses had grown tired of Queen Zythra's reforms and her interest in human ideas. Duke Korath Zexmore had united them under a single banner, promising to return the empire to its proper ways. "They see you as a symbol of everything that's wrong with Mother's policies," Zara said as they reached the palace's command center. "If they capture you, they'll make an example of you." The command center was in chaos. Holographic displays showed rebel ships attacking the palace's outer defenses, while reports came in from across the empire of uprisings on various worlds. Queen Zythera stood in the center of it all, issuing orders with calm authority despite the crisis unfolding around her. "The rebels have taken the eastern spires," an officer reported. "They're advancing on the main palace complex." "What about our fleet?" the Queen asked. "Half of our ships have joined the rebellion. The others are engaged in battle above the planet." Jake studied the tactical displays, his military training kicking in despite the alien technology. "Your Majesty, your defenders are trying to hold fixed positions, but the rebels are using their mobility advantage to hit you from multiple directions." Queen Zythera looked at him sharply. "You have experience with such matters?" "I was a military officer before I became a salvage pilot. If I were commanding your defense, I'd pull back from these outer positions and concentrate your forces here, here, and here." Jake pointed to positions on the holographic map. "Let them come to you, then hit them from the flanks. You would give up territory?" "Temporarily. Better to lose ground than lose your army." The Queen considered his advice for a moment, then began issuing new orders. Jake watched in amazement as the Calarian defenders repositioned themselves according to his suggestions. Captain Ryan Cole appeared at Jake's shoulder, armed and wearing combat armor. "Jake, we need to get you out of here. There's a human ship waiting to extract you." "I'm not leaving. This isn't your fight." Jake looked around the command center, at Zara coordinating refugee evacuations, at Queen Zythara calmly directing the defense of her empire. "Yes, it is." The battle raged for hours. Jake found himself helping coordinate the defense, using human military tactics adapted for Calarian technology. His suggestions helped the royal forces hold their positions. But they were still badly outnumbered. Then came the news that changed everything. "Duke Korath has captured the Queen," an officer reported, his voice filled with despair. Zara spun around, her face pale. "How, where?" She was inspecting the eastern defenses when his forces overran the position. "Our scouts report she's being held in the Crystal Tower." The Crystal Tower was a fortress-like structure that rose from the eastern edge of the city. It was virtually impregnable, surrounded by shields and automated defenses. The rebels had chosen their prison well. "We have to rescue her," Zara said, but her military advisors shook their heads. "Princess, it's impossible. The tower's defenses would destroy any assault force before they got close." Jake studied the tactical display, his mind racing. "What if we don't assault it?" "What do you mean?" Zara asked. "Your people think like your people. You see the tower's defenses and assume you need to fight through them. But what if we don't fight them at all?" Jake outlined his plan. It was crazy, dangerous, and relied on several factors beyond their control, but it was also exactly the kind of unconventional approach that might work. "You're talking about a stealth mission using human infiltration techniques," Ryan said when Jake finished explaining. "Jake, you're not trained for this kind of operation." "No, but you are. And so are the other human military advisors." "We can do this," Zara stepped forward. "I'm going with you." "Absolutely not," Jake said. "If something goes wrong, the Empire needs you to lead. If something goes wrong and Mother dies, there won't be an Empire to lead. Besides," she smiled grimly, "I know the tower better than anyone. I used to play there as a child." The rescue mission launched that night. Jake, Ryan, two other human soldiers, and Zara approached the Crystal Tower using a combination of stealth technology and old-fashioned infiltration techniques. They avoided the main defenses by entering through the tower's waste disposal system, a route that no Calarian would have considered because it was beneath their dignity. The plan worked perfectly until they reached the Queen's prison chamber. Duke Korath was waiting for them. "Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate such a crude approach?" The Duke sneered. He was a tall, imposing Calarian with traditional noble bearing and eyes full of contempt. "Humans always resort to such primitive methods." "Sometimes primitive methods work," Jake said, noting the positions of the Duke's guards. "Perhaps, but not this time." Korath gestured to his soldiers. "Kill the humans. Take the princess alive. The fight was brief but intense. Jake and Ryan worked together with practiced efficiency, while Zara proved she was far from helpless in combat. But they were outnumbered, and Jake took a blaster bolt to the shoulder while protecting Queen Zithara. As Jake fell, clutching his wounded arm, Queen Zithara broke free of her restraints and stood over him protectively. "Enough," she commanded, and something in her voice made everyone freeze. "Duke Korath, you forget yourself. I am still your queen." "Not for much longer," Korath replied, but Jake noticed that even he seemed affected by the queen's presence. "Look around you," Queen Zithara said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "Look at what this human did. He could have fled to safety with his own people, but instead he came here to rescue someone who isn't even his species. He risked his life for an ideal, for the belief that all people deserve freedom and dignity." Jake felt the queen's hand on his good shoulder as she continued. "This is what I have been trying to show you all. This is the strength that comes from choosing to do what is right rather than what is expected. This is the future our empire needs." Duke Korath raised his weapon. "Pretty words, your majesty. But words won't save your failing empire." That was when the real rescue arrived. Loyal Kaelarian forces, guided by the signals Jake's team had transmitted, stormed the tower from multiple directions. The rebellion's leadership was captured within hours, and word of Jake's heroic rescue spread throughout the empire. As Jake recovered from his injuries, he received visitors from across the Kaelarian worlds. Nobles, merchants, soldiers, and common citizens all came to thank the human who had risked everything to save their queen. But it was Queen Zithara's visit that surprised him most. "You have given my people something they had forgotten," she said as she sat beside his bed. "Hope. The hope that change is possible, that individuals can make a difference. I just did what needed to be done." "Exactly. And that is why you will make an excellent consort for my daughter." Jake nearly fell out of his bed. "Excuse me?" Queen Zithara smiled. "Did you think this was all coincidence, Jake Martinez? The accident, the negotiations, your time here in the palace? I have been planning this for years, waiting for the right human to show my people a new path forward. You want me to marry Zara? I want you to help rule an empire. My daughter loves you, though she has not yet admitted it to herself. You have proven your worth to our people, and together you can build a future that neither of our species could achieve alone." As the implications of the Queen's words sank in, Jake realized that his simple life as a salvage pilot was truly over. But looking out the window at the great city beyond, and thinking about the possibility of building something better for both their peoples, he found that he wasn't afraid of the change. He was ready for it. 6 months after the rebellion, Jake stood on the observation deck of the starship Unity, watching a new world take shape below them. The planet had been designated New Harmony, and it would be the first joint human Kaelarian colony in history. "The terraforming is proceeding ahead of schedule," Zara reported, joining him at the viewport. She wore a practical work uniform now instead of royal robes, and Jake thought she looked more beautiful than ever. "Your people's technology combined with human determination," Jake said. "It's a pretty powerful combination." They had been married 3 months earlier in a ceremony that blended the traditions of both species. The wedding had been broadcast across the galaxy, watched by billions of beings who saw it as either a symbol of hope or a sign of the end times, depending on their perspective. Jake had negotiated the terms of his new role carefully. He would serve as Zara's consort and co-ruler, but he had insisted on keeping the freedom to explore and establish new colonies. He couldn't give up his essential nature completely, even for love. "The first colonist ships arrive tomorrow," Zara said. 50,000 humans and 50,000 Kaelarians, all volunteers who want to build something new. Jake nodded, still amazed that it had all come together. After the rebellion failed, Queen Zithara had moved quickly to implement reforms throughout the empire. Noble positions were now earned through merit as well as birth. Colonial governments were given more autonomy, and citizens had new rights to petition for changes in local laws. The changes weren't universally popular, but they were working. Young Kaelarians embraced the new opportunities, while older nobles found ways to adapt their traditional roles to the changing times. "Jake," Zara said quietly, "do you ever regret what happened? Your old life was so much simpler." Jake considered the question seriously. His days as a carefree salvage pilot seemed like a lifetime ago. Now he spent his time mediating disputes between species, planning colonial expansions, and learning the complex art of interstellar diplomacy. Sometimes I miss the simplicity, he admitted. But I wouldn't change what we're building here. We're proving that different species can work together as equals, and that's worth any sacrifice. A chime from the ship's communication system interrupted their conversation. Queen Zithera's image appeared on the view screen, looking pleased despite the late hour on her homeworld. "My dear children," she said warmly, "I have wonderful news. The Centauri Federation has agreed to send observers to New Harmony. They're interested in establishing their own cultural exchange program with us." Jake smiled. "That's great news, Your Majesty. But I thought the Centaurians didn't trust either humans or Kaelarians." "They don't. But they're fascinated by what you two have accomplished. 3 species working together on a single world. It's unprecedented." After the call ended, Jake and Zara made their way to the ship's command center. Captain Ryan Cole was there, now serving as Jake's military advisor and still looking slightly amazed by how their lives had changed. "The advance team reports that the primary settlement site is ready for the colonists," Ryan said. "Power grid is online, basic housing is constructed, and the agricultural zones are prepared for planting." "What about potential problems?" Jake asked. He had learned to always expect complications. The usual stuff. Some of the human colonists are nervous about living so close to Kaelarians. And some of the Kaelarian colonists think the humans are too casual about everything, but nothing we can't handle. Jake had spent months preparing for exactly these kinds of challenges. The colony would be governed by a council with equal representation from both species, and disputes would be resolved through mediation, rather than traditional hierarchical commands. The next morning, Jake and Zara watched from the planet's surface as the colonist ships descended through the atmosphere. The first wave of settlers included farmers, engineers, teachers, artists, and families from both species, all chosen for their willingness to work together toward common goals. Jake greeted the arriving colonists personally, something that still surprised many of the Kaelarians who weren't used to their leaders being so accessible, but it was important to him that everyone understand they were building something new, where old hierarchies mattered less than contribution and cooperation. "Welcome to New Harmony," he told each group of arrivals. "This is your world now. Help us make it something special." The first few weeks were challenging. Cultural misunderstandings led to arguments. Different work styles caused delays in construction projects, and some colonists on both sides questioned whether the experiment would succeed. But slowly, things began to change. Human efficiency combined with Kaelarian precision to create better solutions than either species could have developed alone. Families from both species began socializing together, and children played games that mixed elements from both cultures. Jake and Zara worked tirelessly to address problems as they arose, always looking for compromises that satisfied everyone involved. It wasn't easy, but it was working. 3 months after the colonists arrived, Jake received a message that made him laugh out loud. Admiral Parker was requesting permission to establish a permanent human diplomatic mission on New Harmony. "Looks like we're becoming respectable," he told Zara as they read the message. "Together. Speak for yourself," Zara replied with a smile. "I'm still a rebel princess who married a salvage pilot." That evening, as they walked through the colony's main settlement, Jake marveled at what they had built together. Human-style buildings stood next to Kaelarian crystal structures, creating an architectural blend that was uniquely their own. Markets sold goods from dozens of worlds, and restaurants served fusion cuisine that combined the best of both cultures. "You know," Jake said as they stopped to watch children from both species playing together in the central plaza, "I think your mother planned all of this from the very beginning." "What do you mean?" "The derelict ship I was chasing when we first met. It was Kaelarian, wasn't it? But it was just sitting there, perfectly positioned for me to find it." Zara was quiet for a long moment. "I wondered when you would figure that out." "So the whole thing was a setup?" "The setup was Mother's, but everything that happened after we met, that was real. My feelings for you, your decision to help me, the way you changed our people's thinking, none of that was planned." Jake shook his head, still amazed by Queen Zythera's long-term thinking. "Your mother is either a genius or completely crazy." "Both, probably. But she was right about one thing. You were exactly what our empire needed." As they made their way home, Jake's communicator chimed with a message from Queen Zythera. The Vegan Collective was interested in joining their cultural exchange program, and there was talk of creating a permanent council of species to coordinate such efforts. "Looks like we're going to be busy," Jake said. "Good. I was starting to get bored with just one planet to manage." 5 years later, New Harmony had become a model for interspecies cooperation throughout the galaxy. The colony had grown to over 500,000 residents representing dozens of different species, and similar colonies were being established on other worlds. Jake often thought about his old life as he stood in his office, looking out at a city that represented the best hopes of multiple civilizations. He was no longer a simple salvage pilot, and sometimes the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. But then Zara would arrive with reports of new breakthrough in interspecies technology, or news of another successful diplomatic mission, or just to share a meal and talk about their plans for the future. And Jake would remember why he had chosen this path. One mistake, one accidental collision with an alien princess, had changed the course of galactic history. It had taught Jake that sometimes the most important journeys begin with the smallest accidents, and that the best destinations are the ones you never planned to reach. As he watched human and Kalarian children playing together in the streets below, Jake smiled and began planning their next adventure among the stars. The universe was vast and full of possibilities, and he and Zara had only just begun to explore them together.